Hey there, welcome back to Coding at Home with the Code Hub. Hey there, welcome back to Coding at Home with the Code Hub. Today we are shifting gears again. We're going back to some old code that we worked on. I'm personally excited to go back to it with some fresh eyes. Sometimes you need that. You need to go away from your code for a little bit, come back and look at it fresh, and we'll get some new ideas. We'll see how to use things maybe a little bit differently, a little bit better. And we'll apply some of the lessons that we've learned in other playgrounds to the Assemble Your Camera playground. I've had a ton of fun with the app at home playground. I hope you continue on with your development. I'm going to push an update to it hopefully tonight, so that you guys can get the code that we worked on during the course of this class. Maybe we'll add some of the other movements into the playground. Maybe not. Maybe we'll save that for another live coding session. But so the goal is for the next few sessions, we'll work through the Assemble Your Camera code again. And then when we're finished with that, we have an option to go look at flashy photos, which we're definitely going to do. But we're going to take a little detour and maybe look at some augmented reality. So we'll be starting completely from scratch. You'll use some of your coding knowledge if you have it already. If you don't, we'll show off some of the things you can use in Reality Kit and a really cool app called Reality Composer that's available on the iPad from Apple, that allows you to do some amazing things. As always, we have our discussion board. You can go have a chat with us on there. Bring up any issues with any of the videos you've seen. I know there are some issues with some of the older videos where maybe the sync is off. We're still struggling with our camera work and our internet connection, full stop. So definitely drop us a line on discussions or at live@thecodehub.ie on email. All right, with that, look, let's get over to the playgrounds and start some coding, all right? All right, here we are. We're in Swift Playgrounds. We'll take a last fond look at App at Home and see our sort of final state for our app anyway. I understand that yours is probably going to look a bit better, hopefully. We have all of our code in this one file here. We could tap on the Files button up here. And we'll see that there's some other files. These are left over from the Camera Create starting point. There's a My App file that lets you set up a photo editor and an album view and everything. But all we're using is just this main.swift file. And it's got all of our code in it. Now we might want to create our own app class to hold all of this information, especially if you decide to build multiple games that all sort of look the same, but maybe have slightly different skins. Maybe we can work on that in a future lesson. But this is all of our code. It's a fair chunk of code. This is where we add the ducks. This is where we line them up when we get bread. This is where we wire up the buttons. If we hit run my code, we'll add a few ducks to the scene. We'll move our fish over. We'll scale up. Our whale works. And then we'll call the bread. Press the bread button, call the get bread function, and they all line up in our little row. So not bad. You'll notice that I took out the code for figuring out when we were near the end, because it wasn't 100% right. So I figured we'll take that out and let you work on that as an exercise of your own imagination. So that's where we wound up with the app at home. Really fun little playground. Shows you that you can actually do a lot in Swift Playgrounds with just a few base classes to work from. So what we're going to do today is we're going to close out of this though, and you're going to find in your huge list of playgrounds that we've worked on so far, go back to the Assemble Your Camera playground. So I'm going to open that one up. If you don't have that for whatever reason, now we're pretty far along, but you can still catch up. I'll hit see all over here in the more playgrounds area. And we're just right here in this learn to code section. We're just on the Assemble Your Camera playground. So we'll go back. We're going to open this one up again. we can see that, so I'm in the using your camera section. We've done all of this stuff. We designed our camera. We had created a camera class. Remember in Lights Camera Code, we used a class that Apple built for us called Swifty Camera. We built our own. We added components to the camera. So things like a front back button, a zoom slider, a shutter button, this camera view. We started the camera, so we actually hooked up the camera view to the actual cameras on the iPad. We styled the camera, so we added a mask image. We added the front back button that'll let us flip the camera from one side to the other. We have a bit of code here in the My Camera class. Here's our front back button as a property. We added our front back button to the space. We connected the front back button to this switch camera function that we wrote. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second, didn't we have to, in our app at home, didn't we have to write that function above where we connected it? Because we're using a class, Swift treats this a little bit differently. So Swift can wait a second and realize that, oh, actually, you've defined a switch camera function on your class further down, because it's organized in a way that Swift will understand that I still need to wait a second and look as I'm reading down through this code to see if there's a function called that before I throw an error. So this is one huge advantage of classes, is you can be a little bit more organized about how you place your functions in the code. So that would be a huge benefit for using a class, because then we can do things like, hey, let's wire up all of our buttons here and define these things like on slider value changed. We'll define that function down below. We'll define the on photo taken down below. We'll define switch camera down below. And then in switch camera, we just toggle whether or not the camera view is using the front camera or not. We added a zoom slider that you recall. We have this on slider value changed function that gets called every single time you drag your finger on the slider. And it basically sets the camera view zoom to the value of the slider plus 0.5. So you'll remember, where was the value here? So here's our zoom slider. When we looked here in the zoom slider page, it explained to us that we did a little bit of math. If we pass in a value of negative 0.5 to the function above, what will the camera view's zoom value be? I was trying to read it too fast. So we kind of saw what values were being passed in. So it was negative 0.5 to 0.5. That's why we add 0.5. I know that math might be a little bit mind-bending. But that's how our zoom slider works. We then added this app class that's hugely useful, because then we set up our whole camera inside here. We create our camera view. We add an image view and a photo album view and an activity button. And we wired all of these things up. So we set the activity button background color. We connected the photo taken property of our camera to our image view input. And you remember that's something we didn't touch in App at Home. This photo taken property was defined a little bit differently inside our camera class, and we'll go check that. We'll go check that out in just a second. Having trouble talking today. And then we even connected the selected image property, or image selected property in album view, to our activity button, image input. So let's run this and have a look at what we have here. All right, like to access to the camera and photos. Here we go. I've got my cool looking Bear camera. My shutter button's hooked up. My image shows up over here, and then it also shows up in the album. If I tap on one of these pictures here, you can see a little selection marker around it. And now I can tap on this activity button, and it'll let me share it or save it. Now it's already saved in my album, so I don't need to to save it there. I can actually message it to somebody, add it to notes, reminders, books. So that's kind of handy. We're fully hooked into the iPad ecosystem. I can use the zoom slider to go up and down. And I can use the front back button to go back and forth with my thumb right over the camera. Pretty good. So that's where we were. We had our app class. We were using our camera. So in this lesson, this is where we added our photo taken property. So because we need to use it outside of our My Camera class, we have to remember to put the public keyword there. And that's something we didn't have to worry about too much with when we were coding in our other playground. But we've added public. It's a variable. Photo taken's the name. And then we have this kind of funky notation. It says output. And it says it's inside these greater than, less than symbols. It says image. And then there's a initializer there. It's got the empty parentheses. And if we look down below, we connect to, let's see, so we call that photo taken. If we go look down here, and we say, all right, cool, well, our camera view photo taken, we're going to connect it to on photo taken. So this is a property on camera view that gets populated when you hit that shutter button. And you hit that shutter button and you call this camera view.trigger function on camera view. So if we go down to, let's find on photo taken. So on photo taken, we get an image passed in. And this is coming from the camera view, remember? And we have this kind of cool notify inputs method on our photo taken. And we pass an image. So now it knows that, hey, whoever's connected to this camera and is looking for my photo taken property, it's going to get updated at this point. I'm going to notify all the inputs looking for data from that property, and I'm going to send them this image. So let's try that. Let's get our iPad up. We'll take our picture. We'll take a picture of the microphone this time. Here we go. We'll zoom out a bit. I'll zoom out a bit. We'll take our picture. So when that gets taken, what happens is we jump through from here, this shutter button pressed, we call the camera view trigger. It takes the photo of the scene inside here. And then there's a photo taken available here on our camera view. And we've connected that to this on photo taken method of ours down below. So if we go down below, we get that message from the camera view that says, hey, there was a photo taken. This is the image I captured from this bare spot over here. And then we tell our photo taken property to notify the inputs and send them this image. What happens then is it goes up to the My App, and I know this is super confusing, and I think we probably need to draw this one out, is we've connected those things back here. So we've said, hey, this camera photo taken property, we want to connect it to this image view input. So what's going to happen is, because we're connected to this, we've now become one of the inputs that our photo taken is going to notify. And they pass us an image. So we draw the image here, and then we also connect our camera photo taken property to the album view image input. So then we save an image over here too. So that's how this whole thing is hooked together. It's fairly complicated, and we would probably want to draw this out a little bit. And the way you could do that, if you wanted to make sure that you had it clear, is you could go into something like Sketches or even Notes. In fact, I'll use Sketches for kicks. what we'll do is we'll just add it. Here's my app over here. And then here's my camera. So this will be one of the components. And then you would also probably have your image view over here. We'll just call that IV, and we'll call this the album view over here. So you might do something like we have our camera view. So we'll have a camera view. We'll have that, and we'll also have one of these. We'll try to connect to the photo taken. So when that shutter button is pressed, and that's all inside here, the front back button, all that logic is inside the My Camera class. And because we're connected here and we've wired them up, that's what these connections are. These are where we've wired up the components to ourselves. When this photo taken gets populated, it will then notify the inputs. So it'll say, hey, you've connected me to these guys, so I'm going to go give that an image and give that an image. And job done. Now, if I were drawing this on paper, I might draw it a little bit differently. If I had more space, I might draw it a little bit differently. And what we'll do maybe for tomorrow's class is we'll try to diagram that out a little bit better, so that we understand exactly how it's happening. I'd love to see it if you could draw out how you think this is happening. Now, I understand that we're just coming back to this after spending a lot of time thinking about our own game. And now you have to get back into this code. And it can be kind of difficult sometimes because there's a lot of code here between my app and my camera. If we look at main, thankfully main is pretty small. It just says let app equals my app. But this using your camera piece is fairly complicated. There's a lot of work that went into this. So we connected our photo taken output to the inputs of components like the image view and album view. We wired that up here. It explains to us some of the other things like image, what this means, and that's just our parameter on our method. This is maybe a better illustration of what we were trying to say, right? We have our camera view, our on photo taken function, how the camera calls this function when it takes a photo, and then this notifies the inputs connected, and the inputs are connected inside the app class. And we were able to run all of this and make sure that the shutter button takes a photo and sends it to the image view, and it also adds a photo to the photo album. Just like Lights Camera Code, only we've done a lot of the wiring up this time around. So this by far is the most complicated bit of code that we've done to date. This is where we wire up all this stuff. We've been so good about creating our own app that will set up our camera exactly the way we want it to. We've got a note here about maybe we're not happy with the camera position or size. Maybe we're not happy with the photo album, where this is where we define the photo album. Maybe I want to use a different album name there. We start the camera. There's lots of places to go in here debugging and try to figure out, well, where are we having our issues? In fact, let's go look at this camera.start, because this is our own camera, remember. This is my camera that we're telling to start. So if we tap on here in my camera, we can find the start function. And that basically just kind of passes the message on to camera view and tells it to start. We did all of our styling of our components up here. We had some funky other overlay images. In fact, let's try running that with the overlay image added again. Not exactly what I want. So that's why I haven't commented out. But you know what? I might actually just delete that because I'm not happy with that one. And the way we have it set up is that when we run this app, this is our My Camera code. So if we want to lay out anything inside here, we would go into the My Camera class and style the components here and also tweak where we add them to the space here. But if we want to change any of the other elements, we would go to the My App class because this image view and this album view are all a part of the My App class. All right, so let's go on to the next one because this one will bring you back to a little bit more familiar territory. Let's style our app. So this gives us a view of the grid again. Now we can change the position. We know how to change the position of these things. We can change the size of a component by editing the width and height. Let's maybe change the size of make our image view a little bit bigger. Make it 400 by 400. Let's run our code. Okay, that's cool. Maybe I want that to show up over my camera. Maybe not. Maybe I want to have it show up underneath. Do you remember how we would make this show up underneath our camera? Well, when we add things to the space, the camera is going to be first, and the things that we add after are going to be added over whatever's been added previously. So we would, if we wanted the image view to show up last, or at the very bottom, we would have to cut that there and paste it in here so that it's at the top. Now, if I try running my code, it's going to give me an error. Oh, saying I've got consecutive statements. So I've got my first space where I call my function. I got to just make sure I have a return there and everything should be fine. If I hit run my code, now the image view is underneath. Another way I could have fixed that was to say, actually, let's make the point a little bit further over and maybe a little bit more up. So let's do minus 150 and a little higher would be, say, 260. Now let's run it. Okay, that looks a little bit better, especially when I go full screen. But maybe I'd want to tweak some of these down and change the position. This is, again, if you really want to get this done much quicker, I find it very helpful to go write this stuff out on paper first, almost with a grid like this, where I have my coordinate system laid out. You know, in this case, we have our 0.0, 0, in the middle, and then minus 500 on this side, minus 500 down here, plus 500 over here, and then plus 500 over here. I would actually draw it out on a piece of paper to try to lay things out and figure out what width and height I want the elements to be. But let's go. So just like with a lot of our other components and even our other components inside our app at home, we can style some of our properties. So we can change the border color and the border width. So let's change our border color to maybe this. Change the corner rate, change the border width, make it a little bit thicker. We can also go and add a background color or image. Let me add a background color for that just so I've got a solid color there. So I'll start typing in image. I'll tap on autocomplete, dot, background color equals, and then we'll give it a color and we'll make it kind of a dark bluish type of color. Rounding corners, we could actually rotate a little bit. Let's do that. So I'm going to start typing in image view. Actually, I'm going to just type autocomplete image view dot rotation equals 5. Let's use 5, the one that they have in their example. We can style the album view. So maybe I want to make them look similar, same kind of colors. So let's use let's just flip it. So we'll do the border color and the background color sort of flipped from what we have on the image view. Change the border width to the same, 20. We'll change the background color of our activity view as well to something a little bit that matches our the rest of our stuff. Let's hit run. Okay, cool. And I can go take a picture of this. Let's see. I'll take a picture out the window. Okay, not bad. Oh, I like that the pictures are bigger now. That's cool. Not too bad. We can style the activity button. You can see that we can even add an image for our activity button. That's kind of cool. We can change the background color, border width for that as well. Rounded corners. Now we changed our background already, so we'll go on and just say, all right, cool. Everything looks great. And that's it. Now, this is something you're familiar with. You've done a lot of styling of your components. This is a way to finish off your design for your photo app with a fully working camera. This is pretty impressive. You've done a ton of work on this stuff so far. So, like, take a bit of time, make sure that the image view and the album view match the rest of your layout and the same style as your camera that you designed, because I know a lot of you spent a lot of time on your cameras, whether they were Wolf cameras or funky inside of letters cameras. You've done a lot of work to get it looking well. So, go take some time to style your camera and make sure it works. The other thing is that you might find yourself going through things like the My App class and saying, well, how do I want to organize this? How would I use this stuff in my own app that I was just writing? Because maybe you're not done with it. I've gotten the playground that I have to a point where I'm pretty happy with it. It's an okay aquarium. It's not great, but it's fine. But I know a few of you have amazing app ideas and you've really run with it. So maybe what you do is you take some of the ideas that are in here and you say, all right, well, I'm going to try adding a My App class. So you would go up here to the files and you'd say, okay, cool. I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to call this one Aquarium App. And you see that I'm using dot notation to come up with the name for our class. Now I want to make sure that I call it .swift. So I'm going to call it aquarium app.swift. And then I can go in there. It's a completely blank file with nothing in it. I can tap to enter code. Now there's no autocomplete for class. So all I would do is just start typing. I want to make it public so other people can use it. So I would say public class. And the name of this file is aquarium app. So I'm going to call it aquarium. And you'll note, because I'm defining a type, I'm using a capital A to start it off with and a capital A for the next word. It's not a subclass of anything because it's its own new class. I'm going to get a curly brace. And now I have a new class called an aquarium app that I could even go and look at my app and say, all right, well, what do they have that's cool? All right, well, they actually subclass an app. Maybe I need to go do that to make sure that I can run properly. I would add a space. Okay, I can do that. Add a camera, image view, photo album view. Maybe I don't need those things, but I'll add the other components like my fish button, my whale button that I added to the previous one. So this is a great place to go and look at other people's code. This is the type of code that you would use to write a real application. You would organize your code the same way. You'll see that what professional developers are really particularly good at, and what they get good at over time, is organizing their code. They really shine when they think, well, how can I reuse this? How can I make this code that I'm writing as easy as possible to use? If you recall, a couple of days ago, we used the distance from function on a point, where we could pass in another point, and it would give this the distance between the two. That was a really useful function that another developer wrote for themselves, probably, to do a bit of figuring out how far things were away from each other. But we found it really useful in our app for being able to figure out where certain obstacles were on the screen, by getting their position, getting our own position, and then using that function to just tell us the distance. So you're going to go through and have a little play around with this. We shifted away from this because I thought that the building your own app would be really interesting. And then coming back to this playground would give you maybe a different perspective on how they organize their code, how they use this My App class, how they use the My Camera class to keep our code separate. The fact that we now have our image view up here, our album view over here, these belong to the My App class, and then this here is all done inside our My Camera class. And especially the techniques that we use to wire up buttons and the properties that we had, like this photo taken with an output image. You can use the same kind of style inside your App at Home class. And maybe that's something that we'll do in the future, is show you how you might use that. Because right now it's hooked up to the camera view. Camera view gives us a photo taken back. Maybe we need to use this in a different way, where we don't have a photo view, but we're getting inputs and we're notifying our inputs of new data some other way. So now that we styled our app and we bring this guy back up, we'll say, learn about what else we can do with photos. Now you pretty much figured out how to build your own camera last week. We're just finishing it off this week. Now what we will work on will be the flashy photos next. That'll be the next playground that we tackle. What we're going to work on tomorrow, schedule willing, we may have to postpone tomorrow's. If we do, I'll leave a little note on Twitch and Facebook Live and everywhere. But what we're going to do is we're going to transition over to a different app called Reality Composer for tomorrow's session. And we're going to play around with augmented reality. So think of things like Pokemon Go. Think of things like the IKEA app is very cool, where you can kind of view the furniture in your house before you buy it. There's a really great app out there called Wanna Kicks, where you can view the shoes that you want to buy on your feet before you buy them. But we'll be talking about augmented reality and working with Reality Composer a little bit tomorrow. Now, if you want to go find those now, you can go off to, here, we'll go back to our iPad for a second. We'll go off to the App Store. And what you're going to do is go search down here. And we'll just look for Reality Composer. And you can see it shows up here. So Reality Composer is what I'm searching for. It's not AR Composer, not any one of these. This is the one here. So it's by Apple. And you can also run this on your iPhone if you really want to. This is a great app. We'll be playing around with this a little bit tomorrow. I have already bought it. You don't have to buy it. It's free. So you can just download it. Just download it, get it onto your device. And yeah, we'll give you a couple of demos of Reality Composer tomorrow. All right, I hope you had fun. Brilliant job building your own camera. Even if you didn't do any coding today, I hope you remembered some of the code that you'd already written, and maybe it gave you some new ideas for how you're going to augment your app at home that we've been working on the last few days. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. At the very least, we'll drop you a quick note to say that we won't see you tomorrow, but hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.